So let me introduce Tara. Most of you know who she is, but let me just also read a little bit about her background. She's a Ph.D. psychologist. I think a lot of people don't know you're a Ph.D., Tara, because you're such a famous meditation teacher. But she's also an author. She authored the internationally best-selling books, Radical Acceptance, Radical Compassion, True Refuge, and Trusting the Gold. She also has a very popular podcast on emotional healing and compassion-based activism that's downloaded millions of times per month. Tara is founder of the Insight Meditation Community of Washington. She's been also a social activist, bringing meditation and compassion into the prisons, for instance, into underserved populations. Along with Jack Kornfield, she leads the Mindfulness Meditations Teacher Certification Program that's enrolled thousands and thousands of people around the world. And on a personal note, I really consider Tara a friend and a mentor. We've known each other for many years. And I've got to tell you the story of how I first got to know Tara and Tara's work. So I had learned about self-compassion from a Thich Nhat Hanh group in 96. And then I decided I wanted to research it. And so I got involved in the Insight meditation tradition. And I was reading books by Sharon Salzberg, Jack Kornfield, Christina Feldman, which mainly talked about compassion for others. But I wanted to think about how can I create a scale to measure self-compassion. And I didn't know Tara personally because she had founded the Washington, D.C. Insight Meditation, and I was going to Spirit Rock, where I was near Berkeley, Northern California. So I read everything I could get my hands on. I created this scale, I created the model, and I published the scale. And then this book came out, 2003. After I published the scale, I've got the original hard copy, and I read it, and I opened the first chapter to the trance of unworthiness. And my first response, excuse me, Tara, this is true, was, shit, why didn't you publish this a year ago? Because I knew this was the book I had been waiting for, because it wasn't just about compassion in general. It was really all explicitly about self-compassion. But I read it and kind of nervously, because I knew, she was coming at it from a more spiritual perspective. And I read it, and first of all, I was just blown away by its beauty and its insight. There's a reason it's still a bestseller. But at the end of it, I thought, I think I got it right. My self-compassion scale actually maps onto what Tara wrote about in this book. So, and then when I got to meet her, and she's just been a wonderful guide and mentor to me. So welcome, Tara. So glad we're on the same page about this.
Yeah, we've been on the same page. I mean, we keep resonating and resonating.
Yes,
so
yeah. Kind of separated at birth in some ways.
So,
can you please tell me a little bit about, what got you so involved, especially in turning compassion inward? Because not everyone was doing it back then. You were really one of the first Buddhist scholars to really focus on, or teachers, I should say, to focus on the importance of turning compassion inward. So what made you think that that would be a good idea to do?
Well, it was just absolutely clear in my own personal experience that there was so much pain in rejecting parts of my own life. I mean, it was just like, it was so clear. And there was pain in rejecting or judging others. So it was really about, how do I open my heart to myself and to this world? And so it really kind of broke open when I was in college. And I might have shared this story with you, but I was on the track to go to law school as very much of a leftist social activist. So I go to campaigns and weekend rallies, very us, them, angry, contemptuous. Then Tuesday nights, yoga, meditation, it was like this huge contrast. And I remember one time, just after one of the meditations, I walked outside, and my body and my mind were in the same place at the same time.
Huh.
And with that, Kristin, there was just this sense of belonging to life. And it was so clear that everything I wanted in terms of, as a social activist, to transform this world wasn't going to come from that othering.
Yes.
making others an enemy. It was going to come from a place of compassion and belonging. And I'm sharing that right this moment because it feels so timely. But it wasn't only the us them pain. It was also, I was so chronically down on myself. I was I was in therapy, I was working on it, but I was felt like I was falling short on all fronts. I was at battle with my body and my weight, and in relationships I was falling short, and it went on and on. So yoga and meditation gave me a taste of more connection, more at home, and it deepened when I really started letting the practice be one of compassion, where and it's mindfulness based compassion really, where I would notice what was going on and on some deep level feel tenderness to it. So that was it. In my doctoral work, I would be weaving psychotherapy and meditation, and seeing how that could help relieve pain. And it just has gone on and gone deeper. And it feels very much about not just our own divides within ourselves and bringing kindness, but extending that really over and over again, extending it to our world.
Yeah, the interconnectedness, the common humanity, which is when you wrote
Exactly.
about that in the book, that's when I realized I'm so glad I added that third component, because that's what you were talking about, interbeing, interconnectedness, and how important that is, that connection between self and other. And then, so did being a therapist also shape, there's a kind of, there was a whole field of kind of contemplative psychologists. So people who were both academics, sometimes therapists, but also insight meditation teachers. And I wasn't the latter, but you were all three. And so how did being a therapist and actually working with people in pain inform your work as a spiritual teacher or as a meditation teacher?
Yeah, it was actually wonderful to be weaving them, because therapy stops short because it does not necessarily envision and give the practices that help people keep waking themselves up. But those practices to wake up sometimes aren't workable unless we have that relational field with another person where we're examining through the stories what's going on. And Buddhists very quickly say, well, it's not about the story, come into but the stories are access. When we are caught in a story about what's wrong with ourselves or others, the roots of that story are feelings, and we can go then into the feelings and then work with them in a way that transforms. So I just feel like the two zones really come together very synergistically.
Yeah, and that is one of the things I really love about your work. I love the fact that it's spiritual in the sense that at the end of the day, it is about waking up, discovering our true nature, but that instead of bypassing the pain and the feelings of insecurity and the storyline, as you say, it's by diving into it and embracing it that we actually walk through that door. And that's what I think is really special about you and your work. Um, I also want you to ask you a more specific question that I've always meant to ask you. So you are a mindfulness based compassion teacher, you're an insight meditation teacher, and you used to teach the RAIN model, which was in mindfulness teacher circles, which is used to be recognize, accept, investigate, and non-identify, very much focused on kind of letting go of the story of separate self. And I think in your 2013 book, True Refuge, I think you even had that model in there. But then you changed it, and I noticed that, to change the end to nurture with self compassion. And why did you make that change? And then what difference does it make, do you think, when you explicitly bring in the compassion as opposed to just non identification?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love this question because it feels really important for our understanding. And Michelle McDonald, who I want to honor, was brought forward the first original RAIN,
Yeah.
and it worked for people unless there were really strong, sticky emotions.
Yes.
And so I had so many people coming to me, and I actually was realizing the same thing, saying, I can recognize something and I can accept it, though I'm not sure I'm accepting, and I can investigate it. but it's still there. How do you non-identify? How do you not identify? And what I found for myself, and it just feels so clear now. I mean, if we use a metaphor, it would be, and this is, I think, the most useful, is like the two wings of the bird of awareness, that we need both mindfulness, seeing clearly what's happening, and we need the heartfulness, the compassion. The two wings are absolutely inseparable to fly, to be free. You think of like a sunlit sky, we need both the light and the warmth. And so this was missing the warmth. And we really have to have it. I mean, if I can speak for myself, and just how many times, let's say, I'd feel distanced or angry from someone close, and I could see it, and I could say, okay, this is happening. But it wasn't until I said, oh, I'm hurting. Okay, ouch. That there was that tenderness that actually enlarged my whole sense of being. So that's why I felt like there was a missing step in terms of really a fully awake presence. We were missing the warmth, and that's why I put in nurturing. But that's, even though it's the last step, it's not the end of rain. And that's kind of what I wanted to mention here, because not identified or non-identification is actually the gift of presence. It's not a doing. You don't do something to not identify. After you've aroused a very full quality of presence, seeing clearly what's happening and holding with compassion, the gift is you realize, oh, it's like I'm no longer the wave of emotion, I'm the ocean that's being with the wave. It's a shift in identity. So I call that after the rain.
After the rain.
Yeah, just because, think of a real rain and what happens, that the rain comes, it nourishes things, but it's after the rain that all the blossoming happens. So after bringing mindfulness and compassion to what's here, the experience is one, you might say, of being the ocean, that fullness of presence, but also being no thing. You're no longer identified exclusively with the waves. It's like, I am no longer that angry, stuck self. I am the awareness, the tenderness that includes it. So that was the reason for the shift in the rain. It's that when we're stuck, we need to have compassion.
Yeah, and I just realized, Tara, is as you were speaking, so I was thinking that more of bringing in the kindness element of compassion, the warmth, which makes a difference. But it also intrinsically brings in the common humanity, that sense of interconnectedness. So if you think about recognize, accept, investigate, or non identify, they're still kind of in the realm of mindfulness, which is the foundation. But the nurturing, as you say, first it brings in the warmth, the care, but then I love that metaphor, the blossoming, that's the common humanity. That's when we recognize our inseparableness from the rest of life and from other people and beings and just being itself.
I
So,
love what you're saying, because in a way, the alchemy of compassion is to dissolve separation.
yes,
And it doesn't just dissolve the separation within our own, it doesn't just reintegrate the pushed away parts of our own being. It reveals our belonging.
yeah, yeah. I've come to start thinking of it as when you give yourself compassion, you're moving from the self to the compassion.
Oh, that's
So instead
beautiful.
of identifying from the self that needs, that hurts and that feels separate and that feels inadequate, you move to the compassion, which doesn't have much self in it. It's interconnected.
I really love that, because in a way, the very word self-compassion can be confusing, because
Yeah,
what we're really having compassion for is the suffering that comes out of a limited identity with self.
exactly. Yes.
So the very nature of that compassion dissolves that small, tight self and reopens us to our natural, belonging.
And that's a great segue because I did want to talk to you more about the spiritual dimensions of this practice. I've always, I think I see self-compassion as a spiritual practice. For a long time, I was kind of identified with my academic hat and felt I couldn't really talk about it. But that's really where my heart is, this awakening. So since you're allowed, do you mind talking about how self-compassion can be a pathway to awakening to our true nature, which is not separate?
I love it, the
You can
invitation.
do
Since
that in
I'm
5 minutes.
allowed. I mean, you're allowed to, honestly.
Now I am. I retired from UT Austin, but yeah, you're really allowed. So go for it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so if we really understand compassion as going towards the suffering that comes from feeling separate, it goes towards the suffering of the pain of separation. And again, I love that, the metaphor of ocean and waves, that when we're suffering, we're caught in like this limited bunch of waves. This is me, and we have forgotten our oceanness. So when we bring the power of awareness and heart, which is mindfulness, compassion, to the waves, it reopens us to the oceanness, which is really formless, mysterious. It includes everything, and yet it's not hitched to anything limiting. And the beauty is that the more full we bring a presence and tenderness to the waves, the more we become that fullness and tenderness. And it's what you said, we become the compassion. We become, you know, we realize that this oceanness is more true than any story we've ever told ourselves about ourselves. And here's the thing that feels important to me is that it takes practice getting to know that oceanness. And what I notice happens is people will do a self-compassion or a compassion practice and feel freed up some, but then they'll move on to the next thing they're doing. And
Yes.
that's actually the moment, that moment of feeling freed up, larger, tender, to actually stay and get familiar. And this is really brain science, that the more we get familiar with that truth of who we are, the more we come to trust it and not believe so quickly when we're inside the small stories. So that's one piece that feels like really a natural way to wake up to the spirituality of this. And there's another, which is self-compassion naturally leads to including others, but we also have very deep conditioning to create self and other, all these biases we don't see,
Yes.
that if we want to truly feel our belonging, we have to intentionally bring compassion to the others that we have pushed out. It's not going to happen just spontaneously. It takes intention because we're in a society that reinforces over and over that some other groups or individuals are bad. And so I feel like, especially in these times, and Kristin, I know you're with me on this,
Yeah.
we need to lean in, really dedicate to going beyond othering. I mean, if there's anything, it's like I can feel my emotion here.
Yeah.
It's a suffering of the times that the chasm is so great and it leads to so much violence. So to go beyond means to actually dedicate when we can sense that we are in some way dehumanizing. And by way of example, I've been doing meditation gatherings with both Israeli and Palestinian groups over the last year pretty much. I was talking to one Israeli man, Asaf, who's become a friend, and he shared about being with an Arab friend some years back who was telling him about his suffering, what it was like to live as a Palestinian in Israel. And Asaf realized that his empathy wasn't really as strong as it would be with his Israeli friends.
Mm.
And what hit him is it was a disease in my soul, is what he said.
Yes.
Not like he hated himself for it, but it was just a disease. It was a separation within his being, and he dedicated to healing it. And that's what I'm talking about, that dedication when we sense the othering, to heal it, because this is the thing, that if we don't, if we think, okay, I'm feeling compassion myself, I'm holding others I love, but we're excluding anyone, any group from our heart, we're actually not touching the truth of our belonging. We're not living in the truth of who we are. So it's totally a spiritual path, this waking up our hearts to what's here. And it needs to be very intentional because there's so much conditioning.
And so, given where we are, I mean, so, we both live in the United States. We have an election coming up Tuesday. And I also know you gave a great endorsement for my Fierce Self-Compassion book, because this idea of speaking up, taking action, protecting against harm is also a part of this process. How do you find that balance between taking a firm stand against what, a lot of people fear is authoritarianism, just horrific racism and othering? How do you take that strong stand and yet not fall into othering? I mean, I'm curious about you personally, Tara. What are you doing to get through this time?
Yeah, no,
Maybe you can help us as well.
I love the question. And as you know, because we're friends, I'm passionate about this. I feel like the fact that most of us are afraid is intelligent. It's intelligent fear.
Yes.
There's a real threat that we're living with. And if we want to respond, it doesn't help to respond from fear. What helps is to sense, what is it I'm really caring about? And I keep asking myself that, whether it's anger, judgment, fear, underneath it, there's something we care about. The more angry and divided we feel, the more it's because there's something we care about. And what I really care about is the suffering that is in this world, the hatred, the anger. I really care about that. I want a world where we're living more from love. So if I can get in touch with what I care about, Kristin, I can act passionately, I can engage fully to protect what's at stake, and yet be doing it from a place that's tender and caring both. It's what Roshi Joan Halifax called the soft front and the strong back, which you call fierce compassion, which is, I mean, I love your work on fierce compassion. We have to have it in these times. So what I do to help myself, I'll just name a few things right now. One is that I act. Action absorbs anxiety. So I'm engaged
Uh-huh.
as much as I can be, as much as I can be. And I reflect a lot about how many others are caring, because it really helps when I remember that. And let's just take a pause right here, if it's okay.
Please, that's great. Then, please.
Because I just, when all of you came on, and I was looking at the little squares and really feeling you here, and some people I recognize, and I know we're here because we care. I mean, really, we're here because we care. So if you just take a moment, you can, if you'd like, to let your attention go inward and just to remind yourself of caring, that you're here because it matters to you to wake up your heart and mind and to be in a world where there's more kindness, more justice, more freedom. And then just to remember, all of us are caring. It's really true. And how many people around the world right now are caring about the suffering of the earth, and caring about the suffering of the animals on this earth, and caring about the injustices and the oppression, the violence, caring about what's going on in so many places, that there's so much caring. And that in the past, just to realize that in the past, there's always been people who are trying to help, the countless human kindnesses. And in the future, like our great-great-grandchildren will want to be holding hands, wanting to be helping, and just sense that past, present, future, the amazing dimensionality of that field of caring that we belong to. so that no matter what happens in the days and weeks to come, that can give a sense of refuge and possibility. We're in this together. That really makes a difference. So, yeah.
And when you're doing that, I think it is very helpful. And I also had the thought of, the people who are coming from fear. And I think those who are, you know, maybe say I disagree politically, is coming from fear, but then it's a part of them that also wants to be safe, right? So trying to remember that for everyone, maybe underneath some layers, it's also coming from care. Just maybe the way it's in it, and it's hard for me to do, I have to admit, because my default is just kind of like don't understand. But that can, so what do you do about that? Like how do you relate to people who have such a different viewpoint in terms of what's going to create safety and what's not?
Yeah. So what you're bringing up is actually the next step of my own practice, and I know yours too, which is that when we talk about the people that are caring, we're not talking about some limited moral group of ethical, better people. Really, it's all of us. Truly, it's all of us. Some are living in a more torqued or tight information field. Some have conditioning that haven't had certain privileges. There's all sorts of context so that caring it's harder for us to see it.
Yeah.
People wear a mask that looks different, but we're not going to be able to heal our world. It doesn't matter what candidate wins unless we can see the value, the beauty, the goodness in everyone.
Yeah.
And so what helps me with that, Kristin, is I've been using the Tonglen meditation a lot more recently.
Okay.
It really makes a difference. If you want to learn, there's a lot of versions of Tonglen out there. I'm speaking to all of us. The one I've done most recently, it's available on my podcast and so on. There's a version I put out that I find helpful. But more generally, it means first we start with exactly what we're feeling, breathing in, letting it touch us, having the courage to feel what we're feeling, but breathing out and sensing we're breathing it into that field of caring, that field, that space of really the heart of the world.
Yeah.
It's not a separate small self that's trying to hold the suffering. It's really being held by something larger. So we breathe in and be touched, breathe out, let it be held by that larger space. Then we widen the field. So we breathe in and out for others who are hurting.
Yeah.
That next step is essential. So many especially in the United States, where we're very focused on our self-healing, we forget to extend the field, but we actually don't free ourselves unless we do. So it's just what you're saying, to bring to mind others that might be behaving in ways and having beliefs that are abhorrent to us. And I sometimes imagine, what would I be feeling if I was acting that way or believing that? What kind of a twist or pain or squeeze? And just to breathe in and out for that being suffering too really helps to free the heart.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tara.